All right, welcome to our first live lesson in Byzantine literature. Today we'll be reading Saint Symeon, the New Theologian's Hymns on Divine Love. Now, just a brief note here in the introduction, as it says, Symeon, the New Theologian, or Symeon o Neos Theologos, lived from 949 to 1022. And he was the abbot of a monastery. He came from Paphlagonia of Asia Minor. And I think we'll hop right into it. By the way, this edition is the Philokalia ton Niptikon ke Askitikon. It's like an expanded Philokalia library, very common here in Greece, and especially monastic theological libraries. It's not the Philokalia. That is well known. It's actually another series, but it sort of has the same themes of neptic prayer and noetic prayer and vigilance and so on and so forth. So right now, this is the first hymn of divine love. There's many, many hymns of varying length. Alpha, ο πρώτος ύμνος. Περιθείας ελάμψεως και φωτισμού πνεύματος Αγίου. Regarding divine enlightenment and illumination of the Holy Spirit. Right? Peri plus genitive means regarding. It's a very common way to give a title of something in Greek. Elampsis is illumination. Photismos, from the verb photizo, is illumination. Pneuma Agion. The Agion Pneuma is the Holy Spirit. Και ότι εις τόπος ο Θεός. Now this is describing what's going on in this hymn. That it's regarding these things and that God is a place. Και ότι εις τόπος ο Θεός ενώ μετά πότμον την ανάπαυσιν πάντες οι Άγιοι έχουσι και ότι ο του Θεού εκπίπτων εν εταίρο τόπο ουκ έξι την ανάπαυσιν εν τη μελούση ζωή. So it's a very strong, it's about heaven and hell essentially. That God is a place. Now this could be considered a sort of almost like a modern Greek style article. In Byzantine Greek, you start having is function more as like an article. O theos estin is topos. So estin here, to be, the verb to be is implied. That God is a place. En-o, in which, meta potmon tin anapavsin pandes iaiechusi. In which, after death, potmos, is a sort of poetic synonym for thanatos, for death. Tin anapavsin pandes iaiechusi. I anapavsis is rest, repose, respite. Pandes iaiechusi. All the saints have. So, and that God is a place in which, after death, all the saints have rest, or find rest. Και ότι ο του Θεού εκπίπτων εν εταίρο τόπο ουκ έξι την ανάβησιν εν τη μελούση ζωή, and that he who falls outside, falls outside of God, in etero topo, in another place, uchexi will not have. So the verb is echo. You can see there's a rough breath here. Exi, uchexi, tinanavsin, will not have the rest, or will not have rest in the life to come. Right? So this is the verb melo. Tito fricton mysterion o enemitelite. What is the awesome mystery, o enemitelite, that is being accomplished? Telume is usually has this sense. It's also related to mysteries and initiation. Enemy, in me, which is being accomplished in me. Logos ekphrasin udamos ischi ude graphin. Now, udamos means in no way. And that's how you can tell from the os that it's an adverb. Logos ischi ekphrasin udamos. So this means word or discourse, words are capable, are in no way capable of expressing, ekphrasin. Ude graphin ihirmu italeporos. And nor is my hand capable of writing, right? Neither is my hand capable of writing. And then it's explaining what is the quality of the hand. Ihirmu italeporos. You see this repetition of the article. Italeporos hirmu. Ihirmu italeporos. My miserable hand, right? My wretched hand. This is a synonym with athlios. It's very common in spiritual literature to refer to oneself as wretched, humble, and so on and so forth. So neither word nor my hand are capable of writing or expressing, right? Unto the praise and glory. Is epenon ke doxan, tu ondos hyper epenon, tu ondos hyper logon. Unto the praise and glory of the one who is, right? So this is the genitive participle of the verb ine, to be, tu ondos. Of course, this is very important in Byzantine theology because God is the one who is, o on. Tu ondos hyper epenon. But here it's not necessarily, there's implications of that. But what it's saying is, my word cannot express and my hand cannot write unto the praise and glory of he who is beyond praise. He who is beyond word, right? Igarta ninte lumena enemito asoto arita, aneklalita pelusi, posekinos, oton tiuton parochevske pietis ipemi, epenon chrisi parimon idoxan proslaveste. So this is a long question. For if the things being accomplished now in me, the prodigal, right? So that like the prodigal son is o asotos ios. If these things are ineffable, unspeakable, unutterable, right? Arita, aneklalita. So these are alpha privatives tied with specific verbs related to speaking. So arita is unspeakable, aneklalita is unutterable. Pelusi, posekinos. Pelusi is a poetic verb for that just means to be. So isin. For if the things being accomplished in me, the prodigal, are, right, pelusi, are unspeakable, unutterable, how can that one, posekinos, otontiuton parochevske pietis, the provider and maker of such things, tell me, do tell, right, ipemi, how could he require, need, chrisi, have need of praise, epenon, parimon, from us, provided by us? Odontiuton parochieske ptis ipemi, epenon chrisi parimon, idoxan proslaveste. So another way you could understand this is chrisi actually is going to take a genitive, right? Like chrisi tu epenu would be the expected form here. But the chrisi is actually going with this, to receive, proslamvanome, which is in the middle voice, to receive for himself. So the question here is, he who provides and makes such things, do tell me, how could he need to receive praise or glory from us? For he provides all these things. He doesn't need to receive them. Ude gar doxastisete o onde doxasmenon. For neither shall be glorified the one who is glorified. And you can understand this is the one who is already glorified. This is a perfect participle of the verb doxazo. For neither shall be glorified he who is glorified, he who is glorious. Os ude lambrinthicete I photos metalavi oparimon plepomenos ilios endocosmo. Just as neither shall be illuminated or shall receive light. Now this is the future, and this is in a very similar use, actually. This is an optative. So it's like saying, just as neither shall be illuminated or would receive light, the sun, which is seen by us, meaning the visible sun. Because very often God is actually considered the noetic sun, the spiritual sun in Byzantine literature. So Symeon is clarifying this: even the visible sun, the created sun, doesn't need illumination. So he's making an interesting analogy here. Just as neither shall be enlightened or would receive light, the sun which is seen by us in the world, it illuminates, is not illuminated. Photisi ou photizete, phani, phos ou lamvani. It shines, it does not receive light. Ehigar oper eleven exarchis ectuctistu. For it has that which it has received from the beginning from the Creator, which can't be taken away from it, is what he's saying. He has it from the beginning by nature from the Creator. Or the sun, that is. The sun has the light which it has received from the beginning by the Creator, and it's in its nature. If God, the Creator of all things, then, who has made the sun, has made it. So here you have piesas as an aorist participle, and here we have the same verb, pieo, as a perfect. If he has made it without need, so even the sun is without need in a certain sense. Of course, not as much as God is without need, but God has created the sun to not need to receive anything from something else, from another source. So that it shines, fanning, with unstinting, right? Another way of saying this is literally unenvious, without phonos. So to shine with unstinting light, selas, a poetic word for phos. Και μη δαμός παρατινός άλλου πλείονος χρήσιν, and to need more in no way from anything else, right? So if God has made the sun to be without need, to shine with abundant light, and to in no way need more from anything else or from anyone else, πώς δόξαν λάβει παρεμού του τεταπεινωμένου? How might he receive glory from me, the humble, right? This is like saying tapinos. It's literally the perfect passive participle, but it has the same sense as o tapinos, from me, the humble. So it's like saying, well, how can I, the humble, who have nothing to give God, I'm full of misery, right, in my passions, what can I do that would be worthy to give God when he's the giver of everything, right? He even made it so that the sun is self-sufficient. So how could you say that God needs anything? It's a blasphemous thought, right? Anendeisgar pandelos otu iliu ktistis. For the Creator of the sun is entirely without need, an endeis. O embiplonda simbada ton agathon apandon. Now, embimblo is a verb that takes very often an accusative, like we have here, and a genitive. And that means to fill something up with something. So the genitive that's the substance you're filling something up with will take the genitive. So he who fills all things with all goods, or all kinds of goods. Nevmati και βουλήμati την ισχύν κεκτημένος. Is possessed of the power to do all things, is implied, right? Simply by a nod and by his volition. By nevma is related to this verb nevo, which is related to nodding. In fact, in Homer, ana nevo means to say no, because you would nod up if you wanted to say no. And kata nevo means to say yes, if you nod down, and that would mean affirmation. So he's possessed of the might, right? This is related, of course, to like the Trisagion prayer, Agios o Theos, Agios ischiros, Agios o thanatos. Holy God, holy mighty, right? Ischiros is the adjectival form of this. Ischis is just might, strength. En tuto que η γλώσσα μου εξαπορεί ρημάτων. And tuto is, it's hard to translate, but here in this modern Greek translation it says, for this reason, right? For this reason, also, my tongue is at a loss, right? So you have the root aporo here, and aporo is related to our word aporia in English, a difficulty, a question, to be at a loss. So exapori means, my tongue is at a loss. And sometimes it is accompanied by a genitive, which means you're at a loss for, right? So my tongue is at a loss for words. Rima, to rima. Kitate lumina onus ora, and the intellect, the mind, sees the things being accomplished. Ucher minevi, but it doesn't. It's unable to interpret them. This is probably best translated with it cannot interpret them. It doesn't know how to interpret them. Βλέπει και βουλεται υπήν και λόγον ουχε βρίσκει. It sees and wants to say. It desires to say. Βούλομαι is like θέλω, but it's slightly stronger. Βλέπει και βουλεται υπήν και λόγον ουχε βρίσκει. So it sees, or it looks, and it desires to say, and it does not find word, cannot find the words, right? For it perceives invisible things, right? That are formless, without form. So these are both alpha privatives. We're going to see a lot of alpha privatives in Byzantine theological texts, especially when talking about apophatic theology, what we can't know about God. For it perceives, or it looks upon, things that are invisible, aorata, anidea isapan, and with it entirely. Isapan is it's like saying pandelos, or it has a sort of adverbial meaning. They're entirely without form, right? Simple, απλά, πάντη, ασύνθετα, άπειρα το μεγέθη. Simple, entirely without composition, right? So material bodies are composed of different elements, right? They're synthetic in that sense, I guess, to use an English derivative of this. So this is without composition. It's simple, entirely without composition. Infinite, boundless, right? Without peras, to megethi, in their magnitude. There is sort of implied. Ute archin gar kathora, utelos olos vlepi. For neither does it perceive the beginning nor does it see at all the end, right? For it sees neither beginning nor end whatsoever, right? It sees neither a beginning or end to what's occurring. There's almost like a little paradox here where it's the things being accomplished within me, tate lumina, right? There's no telos. You can't see, there's no end to the things being accomplished. Mesin de pandi agnoi, ke pos ipi ti vlepi. And not only can it not see the middle or the end, but it is ignorant entirely, right? Pandi is again like pandelos. It is entirely ignorant also of the middle. Ke pos ipi ti vlepi. And how can it say what it sees? Anakefeleumenon olon doko orate. Now, the thing that is seen, right, it is seen whole, right, and recapitulated in itself. So it's seen as a whole. It's not seen as something that's has parts, right? It's seen. There's no parts. And then he says, this is a sort of a common verb to say when you're expressing an opinion. You're trying to express a difficult thought. So it's seen in its entirety, recapitulated in itself, as I think, right? Doko. Uti usia pandos de alati metusia. But not, right? The they comes later here, so don't be tripped up by that. But it is not at all, right, seen by its essence, or in its essence. Right? This is key in Greek patristic and Byzantine theology, that God can't be seen in his essence. He can't be participated in his essence. But he is seen, right? This is also still implied, by participation, metusia. This is similar to the verb metohi, but it almost has a Eucharistic feeling to it. It'd be interesting to do a word study on this metusia. Ektu pirosa naptis gare ke pir olon lamvanis. Now he's going to another analogy so that the reader doesn't get too lost as to what he's talking about. For you light anapto, right? To light a fire. This is like a modern Greek verb anavo, to turn on the lights or to light a fire, light a candle. For you light from a fire, you light something from a fire, and you receive a fire in its entirety, a whole fire, right? And that also, that thing that we're talking about, the ineffable thing we're trying to describe, that also remains actually, no, he's still referring to the fire here, so he's not skipping to the other. So he's saying, you light a fire in its entirety, you receive it, and even in the case of that, of the fire, of the material fire, it remains undivided. Aneklipton is sort of like saying unfailing, unlacking. Osproin, just as before. Osproin. Plindo metadidomenon chorizete tu protu. Yet, that which is being transmitted, so let's say the analogy here is you're lighting multiple lamps, and the fire is being transferred. That's sort of what this means, transmit, transfer, from one to another. And yet, the original fire sort of remains undivided. It didn't get cut up when it was lighting another lamp. So yet that which is being transmitted is divided, it's separated from the first fire, from the first source. And it becomes or enters into many lamps. Or another way to say this, it spreads, right, into many lamps. for it is bodily. So he's saying this. He's basically saying this is an analogy, but it's somewhat imperfect as an analogy. For even this has some level of division, right? Because it's separated, right? That which is transmitted is separated from the first, so it's still in space, and there's a degree of separation. But now he's saying ekino, right? And now he's talking about the ineffable light. Ekino de pneumatikon, but that other light is spiritual, being or existing as something indivisible, right? Pandelosa horiton kiatmiton iparchi, and entirely inseparable or indivisible again, and uncuttable. It is. There's a fair amount of synonyms with the verb to be here. So we have pello, iparcho, ugar metadidomenon ispola dierite. For as it is being transmitted, right, as it is being transferred, it is not divided into many, right? So the u is quite tricky here. It actually goes with a diarite. Alake many atmiton ke enemi iparchi. But it also remains uncut, undivided, and exists within me. So the light belongs exclusively to God, of course, but it's also transmitted to the saints, or to Saint Symeon here in his mystical experience he's describing. And he's saying, even though he's participating in it, it remains undivided from its source, right? So there's no separation, as in like the example of candlelight or lamplight. Exanateli enemi endothentis talenis cardiasmu os ilios, ios discos iliu, spheroidis dignimenos, photoidis os floxcar. Anatello here is to dawn. It's Anatoly is the east, or it's the rising of the sun. So to rise out of, exanateli, sort of intensifies it. For it arises in myself, in me, from within my wretched heart. Endothen tis talenis cardiasmu. Just as a sun, or as the disk of the sun, right? Because the sun is round, of course. The disk of the sun, which is in the form of a sphere, which appears as in the form of a sphere. Photoidis os floxcar, in the form of light, for it is as a flame. Ukida kathos irite ti ipoperitutu. I do not know, as I've said, right? So this is literally as has been said above, right? So instead of saying kathos irika, as I have said, he says, as has been said by myself above. I do not know, just as has been said, what to say about this. Ke ithelon tu siopan, and I wanted to be quiet, to be silent. Ithe ke dinamin. Ithe is like very often paired with optatives. It expresses a wish. Would also that I were able to keep silent, right? He would prefer to honor the mystery by being silent about it, but he'll explain why he had to break the silence, I think, later on. And I wanted to be silent. So bear in mind that sometimes when you're using the infinitive, especially related to intentionality, it's paired with tu. So ithelon tu siopan, I wanted to. This is actually quite easy to remember for an English speaker, because it's like we always have the to, be quiet, in our infinitive. So ithelon tu siopan, ithe ke dinamin. Alatothav matofrikton kinimut in kardian. Now he explains why he's not able to keep silence. But the wonder the terrible, the awesome wonder or miracle moves my heart. It stirs, it moves my heart. Και εξανοίγει στόμα μου το κατεσπυλωμένον. And it opens up my mouth, which is defiled, right? So he's again referring to himself as a sinner, and that's part of why he's shocked at what has happened, because how could this have happened to him, a sinner who's unworthy? And it opens up my mouth, which is defiled, and and so this is sort of vulomenon, is he's referring to himself here. So me is mi vulomenon. And it makes me, although I am unwilling, right? So this is a concessive use of the participle. And it makes me, although I am unwilling, speak and also write. You have a nice little te ke here. O anatilas artimu en skotini kardia. He who has risen, who has dawned. Here we have, similar to the exanoteli verb here. Now it's just the aorist participle form without the x in the beginning. He who has dawned just now, right, in my dark heart, in my darkened heart, or it was dark before the dawn came. He who has shown unto me marvelous things, which eyes have not seen, right, because they're invisible. And he's going to go through a list of who he's talking about. He's talking about God, who's done all these things for him, right? That's why we're going to have a series of these aorist participles. He who has done these things. He who has descended also in me as to the last of all, right? So this is a reference to how St. Paul calls himself the last of all the apostles. O apostolou mathitin ke ion apodixas. He who has shown me, eme, o apostolou mathitin ke ion apodixas eme. Apodiknio is a bit of a tricky verb because we don't necessarily have a direct equivalent to this in English, but apodiknio means apodikni me. It means I show something forth to be something. So I show, and that means I might have made it that way. So here the sense is, he who has shown me to be, right? That is to say, he who has made me a disciple of an apostle, right? Perhaps he's talking about St. Paul here because he's just referred to St. Paul. A disciple of the apostle and a son, right? So a disciple and son of the apostle, whom the terrible dragon, and he's describing a dragon here as being both terrible, dinos, like dinosaur, and murderer or killer of mortals, right? So this is an interesting way to describe the devil, as vrotoktonos. And Echen here is not just had, but possessed. So now he's still referring to himself. So God did these things for me, whom was in the possession, or who was in the possession of the terrible and immortal killing dragon. I, who was before, and bear in mind, this is all, he's still describing himself all in the accusative case, but for the purpose of the translation, I'm just going to use I who was a servant Ipurgos means you work under, right? Ipo ur and ergon, you work under. But here it's actually being used as an adjective to qualify the noun here, ergatis, a worker. I who was before a worker, working under or serving all manner, all kinds of iniquity, paranomia, or transgression. O proeonon ilios, and now back to God, who's in the nominative. He who illuminated, opto proeonon ilios o ento adi lampsas, he who illuminated before the ages as a sun in Hades. So, sorry, the best way to translate this would just to say, be O Ilios, the sun which illuminated those in Hades, right? So we want to split it into two parts. O Ilios, O Lampsas, right? So the sun before the ages, which illuminated Hades, or shined light in Hades. And of course, he's referring to Christ's descent into Hades here. And now there's a sort of contrast here that was the sun that existed before all ages, and later after both all the passing of the ages and after the event of the release of those from Hades, later in these later times has also illuminated me. So he who has done all these things and then later has illuminated my darkened soul. Ύστερον και φωτίσας μου ψυχήν εσκοτισμένην, και χαρισάμενος εμεί ανέσπερον ημέραν, and has granted. So this is a verb that some of you might be familiar with in the hymn Christos Anesti for Pascha, for Greek Easter. Christos Anesti εκ νεκρών θανάτων πατήσας και της εν της μνήμασι ζωήν χαρισάμενος. This is the verb, and it's the exact same grammatical form actually that's used in the hymn, that Christ has granted life to those who were dead, right? To those who were in the tombs. And remember, we're still talking about the same subject here. So the sun before the ages, who illumined those in Hades, and later enlightened my darkened soul, and granted to me anesperon imeran. So this is the day without end, the day without evening, basically. And now there's a little parenthesis here. To dispiston tis kateme okniris ke rathimis. Something, and he's saying that this all is something that is not to be believed. It's hard to believe to those who, like myself, are okniri and rathimi, who are sluggish and lazy. Or indolent is another way to translate that. Sluggish and indolent. Oplisas pandon, and now he resumes the list of these aorist participles. Oplisas pandon agathon din enemi ptochian, αυτός και λόγον δόρισε και ρήματα παράσχου. He who has filled the poverty within me with all kinds of goods, right? With all goods. Now, this is a very important point. Let me actually mark it. Now, it's a very common formula in Byzantine prayers to list all the things that God has done, all his deeds, right? So you make remembrance, and you're talking about who it is you're invoking, right? And then to turn this all actually into the second person, and to say, you who did all these things, you yourself, right? You who did this and this and this and this, and all these things, may you yourself who did all these things also grant a word and provide utterances to all Now I think right now he's I think that still here is implied that he wants God to provide this to him, right? So do you yourself grant a word, also a word, and provide utterances to me, is implied, in order to in order to recount unto all people, tasas telaturgias, your wonders. Teraturgia is a wonder working. So ergon, you have the root there, and then teras is a sign or wonder. It also in modern Greek it means a monster, but in the sense of like a sign, like an omen. Because in ancient Greek mythology, the gods send signs, and sometimes the signs are in the form of monsters, like the Cyclops. But it doesn't sound strange here in Byzantine theology. It just means wonders, basically. Kia per Symeon piis methimon don sondulon, ine ke I kathevondes en skoti rathimias ke legondes. So to recount unto all your wonders and the things, ta pragmata aper, the things that which you do today amongst us, or in the midst of, amongst your servants or your slaves. Ine kei kathevlandes and skoti rathimias. In order that also those who are sleeping in the darkness of indolence, right? We have the noun rathimia, which is of course related to the adjective rathimos here. It's related to radion and thimos, to have like a spirit that's is at ease, but in a bad sense, right? So in order that those who are sleeping in the darkness of indolence and who say, αδύνατον αμαρτωλούς σωθήνε και ως περπέτρον και λοιπούς αποστόλους αγίους, οσίους και δικαίουστε αυτούς ελεηθήνε, γνώσωσι και μαθήσονται ότι εύκολον τούτο, τι αγαθότητη τισί ειν και έστι και έστε. So that those who say that, and now this is what they're saying, these are the people who are sleeping in the darkness of indolence, and they're saying, estin adinaton, so estin is implied here, it is impossible for sinners to be saved. And as Peter and the rest of the apostles, saints, holy men, and righteous, both, so I should quick note that this is sort of the end of the quotation. It tripped me up for a second. So that also those who sleep in the darkness of indolence and who say, estin adinaton amartolus sothine, it is impossible that sinners be saved. It is impossible for sinners to be saved. And now this is Saint Symeon speaking again. So end quote. And just as Peter and the rest of the apostles and saints and holy men and righteous ones, dikios is often a term that's referring to the righteous in the Old Testament. And just as all of these were shown mercy, right? So God had mercy on them, that they might know, that is the sleepers, that they might know and learn, that this is easy for that this, not only that it is easy, but it was easy and is and always will be easy for your goodness, right? For you. That is, it will always be easy for God in his goodness to save everybody. It always was and is and will be.